Jürgen, are you ready for session number 2? Are we ready for session number 2?
Absolutely. Everybody else too, I hope.
Yes. So do we have all our panelists here, or are we missing someone? No, we have 3 speakers and 1 moderator. So then welcome everyone to session 2 of the RI.Logistica. So Jürgen, what's on the menu now?
Well, first of all, I'm kind of exhausted after session number 1. So this is going to be a long 2 days experience, but I am learning a lot, and I expect to do that now as well when we're talking about the fast and furious, delivering, let's say, small things around the world, but also how we, let's say, can make practice of standards. So take it away. Eager to hear.
Yeah, and we hand over with that to Anton Ussi, who is the Administration and Finance Director of Atris ERIC, and the floor is yours now. Thanks very much.
Thanks. Good morning, and thanks very much already for the very exciting sessions we've had so far. This morning was really interesting to hear really the major logistical challenges. I have to say I'm particularly happy not to have a 2 billion euro sort of non-insurable case that I have to handle. So I'm quite looking forward to discussing the small things that we have to discuss today, which is really about the experimental conduct, setup and conduct in life sciences and chemistry. Obviously, there are some unique challenges, specifically around transporting live and possibly dangerous pathogens, animals, living systems that are time sensitive, temperature sensitive, and fragile. So it'd be very interesting to hear this morning from both practitioners of the art of the experiment and in the art of the logistics. Looking forward to the presentations today. We have 3 speakers, and then we'll have a panel session at the end. Do please not forget to ask some questions so that we have a lively discussion at the end. So my name is Anton Ussi. I work for Atris, where we perform applied research, really trying to apply knowledge and trying to develop new medicines out of that. So we go everywhere from cells to crystal samples, through to mice, to non-human primates, and to patients. So the logistics can be quite interesting there. I would like to first introduce Sophie Zimmerman, who's a senior scientist at Molox GmbH, who is going to speak about use cases on fragile and sensitive and perishable materials. And Sophie is a biochemist by training, and who, after postdocing at EMBL, focusing on protein crystallography, moved over to BASF in industry, and now is at Molox, where she's a senior scientist. And Molox specializes in structural biology for pharma and biotech companies. So it'll be very interesting to hear your experiences. Sophie, do please take it away. Thank you.
Anton, thank you very much for the kind introduction and also for the possibility for me to speak here. So let me share my screen with my slides.
Perfect.
Can you see them? Super. Great. Okay, so as I said, actually, as Anton said, I'm a biochemist by training and a structural biologist, and I work at Molox, which is a CRO based in Berlin, and our business is all about proteins. So the company was founded in 2012 by 2 structural biologists, by Holger von Möller and Bernhard Loll. And we are a team of experts in structural biology, mainly focusing on drug discovery. Basically, in the company, we can do the whole process from producing proteins to determining their atomic resolution structures. And we drive projects for pharmaceutical industry, for chemical industry and biotech industry all over the world, basically. We also partner with academic institutions to basically stay at the forefront of science, and we also work together with a lot of other leading CROs in the field. Now, why is structural biology actually important? So I'm sure you all know this little guy here on the left. It's been all over the place, unfortunately. And the red protein that you see on the surface of the coronavirus, that's the spike protein. And the spike protein is absolutely essential for the infectiousness of the virus, because it basically binds to the ACE2 receptor on human cells and allows the virus to then enter the cell. Now, the atomic resolution structure of the spike protein in complex with the ACE2 receptor was solved by cryo-electron microscopy and also by X-ray crystallography. And only because of these structures, we understand how the virus infects us. And it also gives us the possibility to understand, for example, how mutations in the spike protein affect the infectiousness of the virus. Structural biology also allows us to understand how drugs bind to their target proteins. And this is, of course, very, very interesting and important for pharma industry, because if they know how a certain drug candidate binds to the target protein, they are able to modify the drug candidate to make it more powerful, as in binding stronger to the target protein. And this is basically our business model. So we provide the scientific expertise and infrastructure for supporting pharma industry to gain information. Now, what does this process look like for us? We start with a gene. So DNA coding for a protein of interest. And we order this DNA from specialized companies. We then use this DNA to reprogram cells, either bacterial cells, human cells, or insect cells, to make the protein of interest for us. And then subsequently, we have different methods, different chromatography techniques to actually purify this protein. For example, separating proteins of different sizes. And since proteins are extremely fragile, we need to store them at very low temperatures. So -80 for most of them. Sometimes they can also handle -20, but yeah, -80 is the best. And the most important thing is keeping the temperature constant. So temperature fluctuations are a problem. In this process of going from DNA to purified proteins, there are certain transport ways involved. So usually, as I said, we order the DNA from, for example, companies in the US, and then we receive the DNA. This can be shipped at room temperature without any problems. DNA is very stable. And in general, there's also no safety precautions required here. We then turn the DNA into proteins. For example, this RNase inhibitor, which we actually sell worldwide. So we need to send it. We usually send it on dry ice. In the case of the RNase inhibitor, we can also send it on cold packs because it's very stable. If we send on dry ice, we usually work with FedEx. We send in a styrofoam box and it has to have a cardboard packaging around it. And of course, I mean, there has to be the proper labels on it saying that it contains dry ice and so on and so forth. I mentioned that we also specialize in protein crystallography. So we turn these purified proteins into beautiful crystals. We have a high throughput facility that we can use for this using a robot that basically mixes nanoliter volumes of the purified protein with different chemicals. And then if we're lucky, we get these beautiful crystals that you see on the right here. They are extremely fragile because they contain a lot of water. So usually they are made up of 50% water. And if they get cracks or if they dissolve, it's all over. So we can't use them anymore. Therefore, shipping these crystallization plates is something we cannot do. So they have to be protected. They have to be protected from vibrations and just kept at a constant temperature. And yeah, they are very precious. But what we can ship is the protein crystal actually prepared for data collection. So once we've grown the crystals, we put the 96 well plate under a microscope, and we use those sample holders or loops that you see on the right to scoop up single crystals. And these are then basically flash frozen in liquid nitrogen. And that's the sample that we can then send to a synchrotron for data collection. And data collection basically means that we shoot extremely strong X-rays at these crystals. The crystals diffract the X-rays, and we collect the diffraction images. During a data collection, the crystals are turned, so we basically get diffraction patterns from different angles. And then afterwards, we can use these diffraction patterns to calculate the electron density inside the crystal and solve the structure. This is what a crystal looks like at a synchrotron beamline. So basically in the middle where you see the eyes forming, that's where the loop with the crystal is. The X-ray beam comes from the right, and on the top you see a cryo nozzle that basically cools the crystal to protect it. We use X-rays from synchrotrons because we basically need the power. And I'm sure you're all aware what a synchrotron does. Just a brief reminder. So basically, synchrotrons are massive machines where electrons are being accelerated on a ring. And during this acceleration process, the electrons give off extremely strong X-rays. And these X-rays we are using for our experiments. We have contracts with most synchrotrons all over Europe. And we send crystals once or twice a week for data collection. Before COVID, we would travel there ourselves. So we would send the crystals and then maybe go to Hamburg, to DESY, or also to Lund to collect data. Nowadays, we log on remotely via TeamViewer, and we get a lot of support from the beamline teams at the synchrotrons, who basically load our crystals and take care of all the experimental setup at the beamline. And this is what our transport systems look like. So you see the crystal on the left, and then in the middle, you see two types of sample holders. They are called pucks, like basically like ice hockey pucks. Either a spine puck, which is the one on the left, or a unipuck, which is the one in the middle. And they can hold 10 or 16 of those crystals. The pucks are then put into dewars, which are cooled with liquid nitrogen to keep the temperature very low. And for transport, we use those transport boxes that you see next to the dewar. And of course, I mean, it's very important here that, yeah, the dewar is transported the right way around, because if it's thrown or if it's put on the side, then the crystals might get damaged. Now, to summarize all of this, we send different types of samples. We send DNA, which is pretty easy actually. We receive DNA, of course. It's it's no big deal. Proteins can be tricky, especially the ones that are very fragile, because they need to be kept very cold, and transport needs to be fast. Sending protein crystals is something that is fairly established, but it's also important that sending those crystals is done quickly so that there's no delays in the shipment process. We actually also send data, of course, because once we have collected the data on the protein crystals, somehow the results need to be transferred to the customer. Usually we provide download links, but in some cases, because of company policies, we also send hard drives. And I've listed the requirements that we have for transport here on the left. So of course, things need to be fast. We need to be able to trace where our packages are. We need to be able to rely on the transport company, and we need to be sure that the samples are handled with care. Since we are a small company, of course, money is an issue. So we also need to have inexpensive transport possibilities. And because we do everything ourselves, it's important that we have little work with it. So the less bureaucracy, the better. Problems that we have run into are, for example, strikes, where our dewars get stuck, and sometimes it has happened that they warm up, which means that the samples get destroyed. We recently had a problem, but we ordered antigen tests. That was not really something that was related to samples, but that was related to our work safety. So we ordered antigen tests to test ourselves twice a week, and the package got lost. So that was a problem. It took us, it turned up in the end, but it took us some time to find it. And we have experienced some problems recently because of Brexit, because suddenly we need to fill in more forms and so on and so forth. And this, of course, takes our time. Right. And with this, I'm at the end of my talk. I thank you for your attention, and I'm looking forward to your questions.
Sophie, thank you very much also for keeping perfectly in time, and also for the very interesting overview of how Monox conducts your business-to-business research activities. Interesting to see that despite being business-to-business and where logistics is a core part of your daily routine, things still go wrong. So in the discussion, I'd like to maybe zoom in on those a little bit, and I see there's a couple of questions which we'll leave to the discussion at the end. So thank you, Sophie. We'll move directly on to Isabel, who will be talking to us about the preparation, execution, and follow-up process in the research process. And Isabel is an experienced structural biologist who is at the European Molecular Biology Laboratory, EMBL, at the moment, and who supports macromolecular crystallography users at the EMBL Beamline and Petra 3, and also does her own research around structural biology approaches to engineering enzymes for biotech applications. So Isabel, we'd be very interested to hear from you also the experience of the non-professional user coming in and messing up your logistics that you've so carefully put together. Please, we'd love to hear from you on your process there. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Anton. Thank you for the kind introduction, and thank you, the organization, for the invitation and to give me the chance to show the side of the facility, what at the synchrotron we have to do to make sure that the user comes and performs the experiment and everything goes well. And thank you for the goodies also, they were very nice. And I will share my screen, not to delay. Okay, so I will try to to show you in the next 15 minutes, yes, the synchrotron site and how we organize everything to make it possible for a user to bring their samples and to collect data and to go back and perform their research. Sophie has already gave a very good introduction of what structural biology is and also what type of samples we need. And I will pick up on that. Okay, so I am as Anton said, at the MBL. MBL, it's an intergovernmental organization that is that includes 27 member states, full members, and 2 associated members. And we are distributed among 6 sites across Europe, and I'm located in Hamburg, where we have and coordinate facilities for structural biology. So in Hamburg, we are at DESI campus, where there is Petra 3 ring, which is a 3rd generation synchrotron radiation source, and where very strong, as Sophie said, very strong X-ray radiation is produced. So we coordinated structural biology facilities, and it is a sample preparation characterization facility and 3 different beam lines. So this sample preparation and characterization facility, the goal is to close the gap between the user lab and the synchrotron and the beam line. So before, in the past, the common thing was that the user would prepare everything, would produce their crystals in terms of protein crystallography. They would prepare the crystals at the user lab, their own lab, and then they would bring the crystals to the synchrotron. But at the synchrotron, and to get good data, we have to have very, very specific conditions for the samples, and the sample have to have particular characteristics, and to make sure that they take the most advantage of our beam lines, we created this facility which helped the user to optimize their samples. So instead of just coming with a crystal, a user can come to the facility, prepare the crystals, prepare everything, and take and in a way that then they can perform a good experiment at the beam line. So then, as I said, we have 3 different beam lines. We coordinate 3 different beam lines, 1 focused in small angle scattering and 2 in macromolecule crystallography. So how can the user access all this? The user has to submit a proposal. Usually there is the main proposal submission once per year by the end of the year, but throughout the year you can also submit rolling proposals, and we have all these type of proposals. These proposals are then evaluated by an external committee that ranks the proposals, and if the proposal is above a certain threshold, the user receives an invitation, and if the user accepts, they have to register into the user portal. They have to register the people that come to perform the experiment and which type of samples, and then they can come for their beam time. And all this is coordinated by the user office. So the user office are these 3 ladies, 3 very nice ladies, and they support the users with the proposal preparation. Then once the proposal has been accepted, with the sample shipment, safety training, the issuing the DAX cards. These are cards that allow the users to to access the experimental hutches and to perform the data collection. So also with accommodation and travel support if the users come on site. Then from the side of the beam lines, you have all these people involved to make sure that everything goes well. So regarding the MX beam lines and the SAX beam lines, you have people, so the local contacts that help the user again to prepare and to perform the experiment. And all these engineers and that support and make sure that everything goes and works fine. And I should say that the flow of information between the user office and especially the local contacts, it's really crucial, because we have to know exactly what the users are sending and when they send, when it is arriving, and what they want to do. So they have these 3 types of experiments. They can come on site, or they can send the samples and do everything remotely from their home lab, or they can send the samples and we do the experiment for them. So as I said, they have to register everything in the user portal. And then we have these 2 types of platforms that they can use to follow what is happening at real time. So the crystallization data management, if the user sends the protein sample, for example, and wants us here to perform the crystallization, and then so they register everything in CRIMS, the projects, the samples. Then from the lab, they can actually follow and ask for specific screenings, for instance, for crystallization. They can check the results, they can select the crystals, what they want to harvest, what they want to collect, and this everything can be controlled remotely from their home lab. And if they are just sending crystals, as Sophie gave the example, so they can include everything that they send into iSpy-B. So this is a platform that is common to the majority of the synchrotrons, so they can say specifically how many transport dewars they are sending, how many pucks there are in the transport dewars, the samples they can register each sample, that all this information then is coordinated and is synchronized with the MXQ, which is the interface we use to collect the data to perform the experiment. And at their home lab, the user can follow everything. So for this particular sample, it was possible to collect how many images and what the auto-process results were. And they can even check the results from the processing and download the data remotely. And so we receive different types of samples that are sent at room temperature or in dry ice. And this is mainly for SPC, which is the sample preparation characterization facility, and for the SACS beamline. For the crystals, as Sophie said very well, they are very sensitive, so they have to be sent in transport dewars. And then once they arrive, we transfer them to the tank. This is how, so the tanks we have here at our beamlines can take a capacity of 170 crystals. So we transfer them there. This is filled with liquid nitrogen, and then we perform the experiment. We have users from all over the world that are sending samples, academic and also from industry, and they reach us, if they come on site, they can bring the samples with them, or of course they can ship them. And that's how it looks like. Our storage of dewars for with crystals, and in particular for macromolecular crystallography. So for crystals, we have to return the samples. So the user office has to make sure that it coordinates everything regarding sample shipment from the user, and then that returns all these boxes with the transport dewars back to the user lab. So there is a lot that can happen in all this process. So again, the time that those transport dewars stay at low temperature is maximum a week. So this is crucial that the transport is within that time. If there are strikes, if there are holidays, or if customs is not clearance, is not being taken care of, or if there is this is a problem that appears, it's not clear, and then the dewar gets stuck in the customs and it's not liberated, and it gets delayed. This can be critical, and then the crystals, if they are warmed up, they are lost. So also in this transportation, it has happened also that the users send several dewars to different places, and then a dewar came here by mistake instead of going to another synchrotron. Another thing that can go wrong is the financial support. So users ask for financial support to send the viewers to come for accommodation, for transport, and this has to all be approved before the experiment date. And sometimes that doesn't happen, and this, of course, can be problematic. Sample identification. So you've seen, as Sophie said, the samples are sent in pucks, in those pucks, and those pucks have an identification. So then we have to make sure that we identify the pucks and we make the correspondence with everything that the user loads in terms of samples. And right now, here in Hamburg, we do it by hand. So we identify the pucks and then we check, and then we do that by hand. In other synchrotrons, they have a barcode reader, and then the user also uploads the barcode reader, and then that step is more automated. But for the time being, we don't have that part yet. Another problem that is also, it's more regarding sample handling, is the fact that, as you saw, there are two types of pucks that can be sent. One that is the unipuck, which was developed in the United States, and the spine puck. And the spine puck, that's what we have here. But because the unipuck is already, it's being used in the majority of the synchrotrons, for us, it's a problem. So there are users that only have spine pucks, not only have unipucks. And then we have to transfer, or the user has to transfer all the crystals from unipucks to the spine pucks. And it means that we have to send pucks to the user so they can actually do that transfer. Or we have to do it when the crystals arrive, which is tricky, of course, and things can go wrong. Then another thing that can be an issue, it's sample storage. So if everything goes well, as I said, the viewer arrives with the sample on the day before, and then next day we upload the samples into the tank, and then we perform the experiment. But sometimes either because of the viewers got delayed in the transportation and they didn't arrive on time. So we have to keep the samples until the next experiment, or we have to somehow coordinate that. Or because there was a problem with the beamline and the samples could not be measured, or sometimes they send too many samples to be measured and they don't have time in the allocated beam time to finish. So that can also be a problem, because we have limited space, and all these samples have to be kept at very, very cold temperature. So yes, this can also be an issue. And that was what I had to say. I should thank all these people that make sure that the facilities and the beam lines work well. And I thank you for your attention.
Isabel, thank you. Very clear, very interesting coverage there of how you work at Pageworth 3. Some very clear also take-home messages for us and areas to work on. I think it's sort of almost satisfying to see that everybody experiences the same problems, because now we're going to hear from Nathan de Volk, who I think from a previous experience in really creating a standardization process for an entire industry could act as a bit of a role model for us here in the life sciences industry to see how can we lend ourselves to a standardization process. So I'm going to now introduce Nathan de Volk, who's hopefully going to be the Deus Ex Machina who comes and solves it for us all. And as co-founder and current chairman of Pharma Aero, which is a full member of the IATA Time and Temperature Working Group. He's in the previous used this role to actually do some amazing standardization work across the industry. So it's been very nice to hear from him. Nathan heads the cargo product routes and development team at Brussels Airport. So I think as a true practitioner of the logistics process, we have a lot to learn today. Nathan, please do enlighten us. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for the kind introduction, Anton. Can everybody see my screen? Yes. Okay.
Yes.
Thanks. Let's kick off. So as introduced by Anton, I was actually invited to as a bit of an external speaker to this panel and to this conference, speaking out of experience from the transport industry. So I'm an engineer that ended up working for an airport and heading the cargo department at Brussels Airport, and on the side also. Setting up a big collaboration effort within the air cargo industry, where we bring together several airports and different operators in the air cargo industry to join forces and to improve the handling of pharmaceutical time and temperature sensitive goods. And I hope I will be able to share some best practices and lessons learned that can be useful for this group. So let's kick off with setting the scene. If we look at the air cargo industry, there are some challenges for when transporting time and temperature sensitive goods. It's a very fragmented industry with a lot of different operators that all have their individual specific process to optimize. But as a result, the overall process is composed of logistical silos with sometimes in the worst case scenario, minimal transparency, not always a very collaborative approach, and the use of technology, the level of innovation in this industry is not always up to standard, or at least not everywhere in the world. So if we look at what and if we listen carefully to our customers, and in this, if I speak about customers in this case, it's really the end customer. So the pharmaceutical producer that wants his biological molecule to be shipped and wants to be sure that his product is handled carefully. Well, we learned that there's a clear need for visibility, transparency about the status of the shipment. There's an expectation that all the different operators work together and make it happen. There's some expectations towards digitization, so possibilities to share data and making sure the customs processes run smoothly. And looking at again that supply chain, a lot of the different operators, a lot of airports in our industry are very much focusing on their own process. So they zoom into this optimizing their own process. But instead of doing this, we have always preached that towards our local cargo community, that we needed to work together as an integrated logistics chain, because the weakest link defines the strength and the performance of the total logistics chain. So we started looking at the airport cool chain, at making collaboration happen on a local community level. And when we got that right, when we got some quality standards in place, we even broadened the scope and we started looking at the global supply chain. So not just working together with the operators at our airport, but expanding the scope and focusing on the global cool chain, so all the way from the manufacturer up to the customer, with collaborations with other airports and even with the ultimate end customer, so involving them into the effort. And that's where Pharma.io was, where the idea came from. And when we founded this non-profit organization, this collaboration platform, we set up a clear mission and vision, and we said that we wanted to achieve excellence in offering reliable end-to-end air transport for pharma and life sciences shipments. That was the reason of existence, by fostering collaboration between certified airports, and the CIV, Center of Excellence by Independent Validators, is a specific air cargo quality standard. So certified communities and together with the pharma producers, the vaccine producers, dedicated in developing and leading when it comes to handling pharmaceuticals. And we started very small. It was a group of 5 airports, 2 airlines, and a couple of pharmaceutical manufacturers. Today, we're after 5 years of existence, we've grown steadily year by year. We have a global coverage with some very representative strategic airports that are part of the board of directors. Also, some big pharma players, manufacturers of pharma and life sciences goods, together with more than 35 other industry members. So that's airlines, handlers, forwarders, solution providers, you name it. So a very broad scope, which open to everybody that wants to work with us. What are the tools of the trade of this organization? Well, we basically, it's a no-nonsense approach. We walk the talk. Instead of talking a lot at conferences and at webinars, which is a good starting point, we also take that next step. We say, instead of just stopping here, we want to test ideas. We want to bring the industry together, organize industry task forces, set up partnerships, share trusted information, write white papers, positioning papers to share best practices, organize surveys to better understand the expectations of our members, and meet on a very frequent basis via virtual platforms. And so far, it has proven to be a very unique and powerful cross-industry collaboration where pharma shippers and these certified operators come together and drive projects. So it's a very content-driven organization. It's not a marketing club. If companies want to join, we basically first vet them, and we check whether they really want to contribute, or whether they just want to have a commercial benefit, and in that case they cannot become a member. But over the past 4 years, we have achieved and finished some very nice projects where we collaborated within our small air cargo industry on setting and expanding certain standards, on investigating the setup and the rollout of digital platforms to track shipments, on organizing, on comparing best practices of the transport at airports of cool chain shipments, and more recently on transporting and setting up global transport systems for the COVID-19 vaccines, where a lot of information was needed, and where a lot of the operators had to act very fast to set up their supply chain to work together with the vaccine producers. On top of that, next to these projects, where the results are shared in white papers and technical papers with the members and the broad audience, we also organize frequent webinars to educate our industry and to share best practices. There's some ongoing projects and projects in the pipeline. A couple of examples here. I don't think it's of interest for this audience to go into detail, but just to indicate that on a continuous basis, we try to have 4 to 5 ongoing projects in parallel, so that all the members can be involved actively at any stage in time, and work together. So we have a project on drone delivery. We have a project on corridor mapping and identifying weak links to solve potential issues before they happen. We share some practices on very lean gateway setups at airports, and we will be looking at bringing together the biopharma companies around their specific needs for when shipping their highly sensitive molecules. What is the setup of the organization? Just to share some insight into the kitchen of the organization, I would call it. So it's a very simple non-profit structure where we have a board of directors that takes care of running the organization and facilitating all the members. So we basically take care of the longer term strategy. What type of projects do we want to achieve and implement? How are we going to finance them? And we really want to look at the next steps on how can we revolutionize the way our industry develops long-term transformational capability. So it's quite visionary, and we are quite ambitious as an organization, and we try to interact as much as possible with existing platforms and regulators in order to not to duplicate the work they've already been doing. And then the core of the work of the organization sits in the project groups, where we want to accelerate the way our industry delivers results and makes the transport of the time and temperature sensitive goods happen. So that's really the core of the organization. And on top of that, we stimulate a lot of exchange of best practices, knowledge in virtual and physical platforms on everywhere in the globe, organized by the different airports. And this is my last slide, some lessons learned, and Jürgen asked me to specifically indicate what route we have traveled and where we discovered that, well, we could do things differently, and what are some best practices we can share. I think it all starts with setting clear ambitions and having a clear long-term strategy, but at the same time look at short-term priorities. So making sure you have some projects and some results. Focus on the content. So don't make it a marketing club, but walk the talk and focus on testing and implementing ideas instead of just continuing to talk about it. Make sure it's neutral, making sure everybody can participate and don't make it an exclusive club. And facilitate your members. So whenever members want to share, want to work together, and industry partners come together, I think it's up to the non-profit platform, the collaboration platform that is behind, to make it happen, and to make sure that people just have to easily dial into a meeting, that someone takes meeting minutes, that a project manager, a project expert is assigned, that the business model is in good shape, and that the financing of the projects is taken care of, so that the members do not have to worry about it. And in the end, be ambitious, aim to be the voice of the industry, aim to have an impact at the way things work, at improving things, and dream big. I think that's the message I can share. And then wonderful things can happen, because I think a lot of people are willing to collaborate, but simply do not know how to start, or do not want all the hassle around it. If you can take all that effort away and have them focus on sharing ideas and working together, a lot of nice things can happen. That's at least what we have seen happening in our industry, and it's a great example. That's the end of my presentation, and I give the word back to Anton for the Q&A.
Nathan, super. Thanks very much. That's a very inspiring example of how to really vertically integrate the entire value chain, bring everybody around the table, and solve some problems in a very high cost area. Thanks so much. I think that's going to be a rich, fertile ground for us to go into the actual session now. Into the discussion session. We have a little under 30 minutes. We should be able to cover some good ground. Thank you all. There's already been quite a good few questions put into the system and already answered. There was one that, Sophie, you answered regarding the team viewer for remote operation, right? If it's secure enough for remote operation, and you say you don't share confidential information via team viewer. So how do you share, for instance, the raw project data with your users? How will you share that digitally?
So basically, we provide a link to our customers via SFTP normally, and then they can download.
Clear. Okay, thank you. Just want
to... And maybe I can add that, please, regarding TeamViewer, for the users, for each user, there are credentials generated. So only the people that are involved in that experiment have access to those credentials, and they are given when we are already in contact with the user. Okay, so when we start an experiment, we start TeamViewer, and then we have Zoom or Skype, and because we have to talk with the user, and that's when we give the credentials to access TeamViewer. So in principle, it should be safe, I would say.
Yeah, thanks very much. Okay, great. Now I'd like to go a little bit into your talk specifically, go one at a time. The actual shipping process itself for yourself, Isabel, because you have users where you're not a professional organization that's doing this on a daily basis, that your users aren't, right? There might be a biologist who's probably never done this before. How often do you experience problem on the outbound side, where they just simply don't know what they're doing? And how much support can you as EMBL give to them on that side of their process?
Yeah, that is the job of the user office. I mean, the ladies in the user office, they are really helpful, and they actually try to advise which are the best way to send the samples, and also the local contacts. So as soon as an experiment is scheduled, a local contact is also associated with that experiment, and we can, you know, tell the users what to do exactly to make sure that the sample comes in you know, in the correct way. Yeah. But that is how it works between the local contact and the user office. We make sure that we tell them and we help them to send the samples with the requirements that are needed.
Understand, clear. Great. And then, so this is both to Sophie and to Isabel. So outbound, you've got the user support office, so you're able to get the samples out, but then you've got obviously the very complex interactions between customs agents and the whole regulatory process. How often is that a source of a problem for yourselves, both Sophie and Isabel? Sophie first, maybe?
I mean, within the European Union, it's no problem at all, you know, so we don't have to deal with any customs. So that just doesn't occur. Delays, for example, because of strikes and so on and so forth, that happens, I would say, maybe once a month. Okay. And then basically, we're just on the phone trying to track the viewer and so on and so forth.
Isabel?
So the way it works, so we have academic users and industry users. So the industry, the companies take care of everything, okay? So the custom clearance and to make sure that all the information needed, they take care of it. Regarding the academic users, sometimes it's not very clear who does that. Okay, and that can be a problem because they send the dues. Of course, it's outside Europe because within Europe we don't have. But if they are shipping things from the United States, from Brazil, then can be a problem. And then if the user didn't make sure that to send the information for the customs clearance, then the viewer gets stuck. And then the user office has to do all that is necessary to make sure that it is released. And I mean, as Sophie said, of course, delays in the transportation, then that we cannot do if there is a strike or if there is an holiday or that is difficult. Yeah.
Clear, thank you. And Sophie, you touched on an interesting one there, Isabel. So these acts of God, this force majeure outside, there's a strike in France, let's say, and you don't have a closed feedback loop where you're getting this information ahead of time, so things are just getting stuck. Nathan, I could imagine this might be an issue that for the pharmaceutical industry, they would have invested a lot of time and energy to make sure that they're aware of such things so that they can reroute ahead of time. You have experience of that?
Yes, absolutely. It's vital for manufacturers to know where the shipments sit in the air cargo supply chain or in any supply chain. And the different operators that handle the shipments invest quite a lot of time and effort in having traceability available. But given the fact that it's a fragmented, segmented supply chain, it's not always easy. But at currently, there's a lot of initiatives ongoing to digitalize the whole supply chain and to create that visibility almost on a real-time basis, allowing the forwarders, which in the end take care of the shipment, to reroute whenever necessary. When there's a strike, when there's an unavailability of an aircraft or of a ship, that there's a backup plan available. Yeah.
And are there any sort of insider secrets that you can share with the audience on, well, there's a good way of knowing what's going on in country A or for a specific sector because we use this intelligence tool or these publicly available tools to kind of just be aware where there might actually be logistical hotspots?
Well, the big question is, do you want to insource that follow-up or do you want to buy it and procure it from a logistics specialist? We see most producers choosing for the second model where they where they do not have, because they do not have the logistical skills internally to know all these little details and industry secrets, if you may call it, because it's quite complex to do that follow-up. That's typically the work of a freight forwarder. So I can only recommend that, and there's some very good freight forwarders, but also some that are not focused enough on your specific needs. I think it's important to do a good selection in your procurement process, and this may sound like an open door, but it's really important. Instead of just using a very basic procurement effort, go for a partnership with your forwarder. Set up a longer term collaboration so that they can think out of the box and support you. If it's just a one-off shipment you book with them, well, they will offer you a basic service. If they can build up a partnership with you that lasts for a couple of years, they can better understand you and come up with some creative, innovative ideas. I think that, especially in the type of field where you are active with high sensitive shipments, I would suggest to go for that partnership approach.
Clear. So Isabel and Sophie, do you have preferred partnerships with specific logistics organizations? Because you obviously have the volume. Your average biologist not, but you will have the volume to where a partnership would be very profitable to a supplier.
I mean, we usually work with FedEx when it comes to duos, and we do actually have a partnership with them. And if we send protein samples, we check several suppliers and we basically check which one is the most inexpensive.
Clear. Okay, thank you. So I have a question from Ivanka actually on customs clearance. Well, first there was a question to Nathan. So in Pharma Aero, are the customs agencies part of that collaboration, or you have a good access to them?
We actually have a good access to them because it's quite difficult to involve customs on a global level because they're organized on a national level. So we basically take care of that in our projects by working through the airports that are active in the projects, and they then connect to the local customs organizations. And most of the time, an airport is quite neutral and good at coordinating the whole supply chain. It works well. So the airport operator is commercially neutral enough for the customs to be taken seriously. So it's a good partnership we typically can use there. Yeah.
Clear. And this is a question to all of you, I suppose. Any tips on how to handle that customs process? Things you've learned over the years, the must-dos or don't-dos to make sure that the timeliness is not going to be too much of a risk?
Talk to an expert first. So, I mean, when I started sending duos, I remember the first time when I was a postdoc at EMBL, I sent a duo to Switzerland and I had no clue what I was doing. And of course, it went totally wrong. I think I missed some, I don't know, I filled in some forms not in the right way, and we had a delay. And everything worked in the end, but yeah, it was interesting.
Indeed, I can imagine.
Yeah, I also agree. I mean, talk to the user office. The ladies really help you. And there is, in terms of synchrotrons, all have user offices. So you have always, and they will help you to find the right way for you. Yeah. And
a question to Nathan regarding radiopharmaceuticals, obviously even more time pressure because of the radioactive decay. Does Aeropharma cover this as well?
Well, we focus on a broad category of everything which is time and temperature sensitive. So it absolutely falls under that umbrella. We haven't done a specific project on it, but I can only indicate also as my job as head of cargo at Brussels Airport, these type of shipments are highly sensitive. We handle quite a lot of them in Brussels as well, and you need experts for that. And there again, this whole segmented supply chain, each individual segment needs to have the right level of expertise. If you want to make it work, avoid weak links. Yeah.
Clear, understand. Yeah, there's a comment here, not really a question, but a comment from Ivanka. So customs clearance, she's saying, yes, it does depend on the company. And there's specifically one company where they've had a lot of issues with additional feedback. So I guess it says even more for having a partnership with a reliable supplier, people that you can trust as well. Maybe we could spend a moment looking at, so each of you have given really good feedback on what are some of the pitfalls and some of the causes of delay. Let's look at a forward-looking sort of vision. And if we were to try and bring the industry together, a little bit like Aeropharma has done really in this vertical integration, where are the things we need to look? I heard the word digitization, so digital traceability, digital documents. Maybe we could start there. Where would you say, as practitioners, Isabel and Sophie, how could, going fully digital with the supply chain, how could that help your process?
Well, it would definitely speed things up. I mean, at the moment, I'm filling in forms, I'm printing them, and I'm sticking them on different parcels. So, yeah.
Yeah. So this would be a high priority areas.
Yeah.
Isabel?
Yes, I agree with that. It would speed things up, and it would make them also easier. For instance, in our side, we received a lot of duers from all different users. We have to precisely identify where they come from, and then also the content of the duer. We have also to identify them. So having that all more automated and that would help a lot. And to prevent from mistakes that are human mistakes and they occur, right?
The corollary of that would be that you'd have to first come up with a universal language, right? So universal taxonomy and nomenclature, and then the codification also into a universal language. So Nathan, is there prospect of doing that, or is it simply too fragmented?
Well, I think on a customs level, there's the specific customs codes that can be used per type of commodity. So there, and secondly, within the air cargo industry, there's digitization happen with standardizing the status update messages. And I think it would be highly useful if the whole digital effort would already start from the production side, because it will reduce errors when copying information into these air cargo systems of forwarders. It makes sense. This is definitely a future to explore. The question is, how can you easily integrate it with standard messaging, standard data interchange? And it will probably mean for these type of commodities that the big forwarders have to set certain standards, certain standard input interfaces. Yeah.
So that really would be the actual providers, so the FedExes and DHLs and all these guys coming together. Is there precedent of that? Is it an industry that's willing to do that, or is it still ultra competitive?
Well, the big logistics service providers are investing heavily in this, in digitizing their processes and offering a very easy access. So it really depends on which logistics operator you use. And there, I have to admit, typically the very big groups have deeper pockets to invest in these type of digitization projects, and they are the first ones to adapt. The smaller, more niche operators probably well, it's a heavier investment for them, so that it might take a little bit longer. But there are definitely there's a lot of evolution in this field. Yeah, absolutely.
Clear. Okay, thank you. And then from the actual research conduct end, do you feel that, for instance, your CRIM system, is there a need for further standardizing this across different research facilities, so that there is one universal system? Is there prospect of that?
Yes, I mean, it's the CRIMS, it's the MX Cube. So each synchrotron has a platform to perform the experiment that controls the beam lines, and they differ from one synchrotron to the other. That would be helpful, because if there was a uniformization, because the users come used to another one, and then they come here and they can ruin the experiment, because they they think, or the way they do the strategy, it cannot be the same, or it's not the same. So they have to take that in consideration. Sometimes there are mistakes that can be, really critical and ruin it. So yes, definitely, I would say I/SPY-B. So that interface where they can control is more or less common to all synchrotrons, at least in Europe. But MX-Cube, no, it started, but no, even in Hamburg. So we have the MPL beamlines and we have the DESI beamlines, and those interfaces are different. So definitely, yes.
Okay.
I totally support what Isabel is saying. And I have to say, I'm a huge fan of CRIMS. So I think it's a very powerful system. And I think it would be super if the system was used even more widely for managing crystallization experiments all over the world.
Yes, and regarding CRIMS, so it is something that is recent. Actually, it is very powerful indeed, because you can control from the crystallization up to the crystal at the beamline when you are collecting the data. So you can go and follow all the steps. So it's really, really powerful.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And it doesn't matter where you are. So you can be sitting and have crystallization experiments going on in Hamburg. It's no problem.
And we have a robot that harvests the crystals, so we don't have to do it by hand, which is the traditional way. And you can do everything. So from your home lab, you can control everything, even then the data collection remotely. So you can sit at home and do that. So yes.
Thank you. Yeah, there's a comment here from Elliot around digitization, saying we work with API development to support all cryogenic shipments via paperless trade, but there is still manual copying in some systems from some large freighting companies. So it's interesting to hear. So there's definitely a lot of work to be done in that field, and potentially one, it sounds like that there are investments being made. I had a question from Carola Detta on asking for advice where sometimes the freighter doesn't actually understand fully the components that they're trying to ship, so can't really give good advice on the correct customs coding. Do you have any advice, Nathan, perhaps, or Isabella, Sophie, on how we can, are there specialists who can help in understanding that better?
Well, I think the specialists sit in these brokers, in these logistics companies. If the supplier you're working with today cannot help you, you simply have to change provider, I'm afraid. If you need a provider that understands your business, your shipment, otherwise they will mismanage, or they can mismanage it. So I think that's the simplest answer. Obviously, it's probably more complex than that, because there's not always choice, but it's vital that your supplier understands what he's shipping, what your product requirements are. Otherwise, it's not going to work.
Yeah, thank you. And that brings sort of a related question on costs. Somebody has mentioned that they find huge variation in costs. Is there a way to explain this enormous variations?
Yes, absolutely. It all depends on the setup of the logistics service provider, and this is not always visible, and they will not tell you. But typically, they specialize in certain commodities, in certain routes, in certain hubs, geographic regions. And if you happen to ask them a transport which is outside of their specialization, the cost will be higher, because they will have less volume effects. So that explains the big differences in prices. Of course, this is not transparent for you as an end user, as an end customer. So again, there I'm afraid there you will have to just compare costs, and if you have the time, dig a bit deeper and ask for an explanation. But typically, it's the setup of their network that creates cost or synergy effects. Yeah.
Clear, understand. Thanks. And another question around the unfortunate case of Brexit. How are you handling? I suppose this is a question to all of you, because you've got users coming from the UK, I imagine. So how are you handling Brexit? Maybe to you, Sophie, first.
I'm afraid we handle it by avoiding shipments to Britain at the moment.
Okay.
And we recently got some samples sent from Britain, something we ordered. Yeah, and we weren't prepared, but suddenly we had to fill in custom forms. And that, I mean, it just takes time.
So it's basically just a new world. They're having to learn everything from new again.
Yeah.
Okay, clear. Thanks. Isabel?
Yes, I mean, for the time being, I don't recall that we had anybody coming from England. They also have a synchrotron there, Diamond. So I think they have been using that more. But for instance, regarding crystallization or all the setups, crystallization plates, everything comes from England. We buy to a supplier in England, and that now we have to think, because things will be more expensive paying all the customs clearance and everything. So yes, it will. We will have to think carefully. Yeah, indeed.
Clear. Thanks. Nathan, your experience there?
Well, Brexit for us, it has created a lot of opportunities, because I have to admit it creates a lot of problems in the logistics chains. So as a result, we've seen people avoiding shipping to the UK, as was already mentioned also by Sophie. So it's really happening, and we even see that, and it's going to sound very strange, instead of cargo being trucked via the road from Europe, from the continent to the UK. People are actually flying, because it's more efficient. You avoid the queues at customs. So it's crazy what is happening. So there really are problems being caused by Brexit. They're minimized by the politics, but the reality is different. I think this is temporary. It will fade away, but at this stage, I can only give you the advice to be very careful and to make sure you know the right customs procedures. Otherwise, your shipments are going to be blocked. There's a customs border now, which did not used to be there before.
Clear. Thanks. Before I continue, just checking, Uta, Jürgen, we have still a couple of minutes, right?
Yes, we have. I was
Okay.
just saying you're all doing an excellent job. And I mean, it's so interactive, fantastic. Yes, 5 more minutes.
Super, thank you very much. Yeah, there's a good question from I'm not sure the name, but it's to Nathan. Would the infrastructures benefit from a joint control tower that really books and monitors and even potentially handles deviations? This sounds like an interesting.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question. I just saw it in the chat. I think it could be extremely useful if you set it up correctly and in a neutral way, because perhaps you don't have the economies of scale to set up your own control towers, and you don't have the volume to demand this from your supplier. But if you join forces, well, you can get some synergies and economies of scale that can make it interesting, especially given the extremely sensitive nature of your shipments. I would even add to that, to having a control tower, a more fundamental layer below that, and we've already touched upon it. It could be useful to set up a center of excellence where you share expertise, the typical frequently asked questions on logistics type of hurdles you all face, and that 80% of the questions are probably the same for everybody. It could be useful to, well, on a neutral platform, even recruit a neutral expert to give some standard answers that already solve a lot of these questions. A go-to place, like a single point of contact for if you need a certain type of expertise.
Yeah. And so that the Center of Excellence, I think, sounds like a very manageable and a very, very interesting starting point for really trying to sort of defragment and professionalize, to the sense of, professionalize the user access process. And then look at that next level, trying to sort of emulate a little bit what Pharma Aero did. That's really the different sectors. Where would be, where's key to, where's the most resistance to change going to be? And who should we really focus on if we want to look at trying to create this network or this round table of interested parties?
Yeah, what we learned is that there's always some early adopters that believe in change and working together. I think you have to find those local heroes and put them together in a room and makes the magic happen. Start small and get a track record that prove that things can be changed by working together, because there's a lot of resistance because of sensitivity and data that cannot be shared, commercial, working with competitors. So you have to overcome that fear by proving that you can get some results. Make sure it's very neutral, and find the big elephant in the room which you all face. I think for us it was working together directly with that end customer, which was quite unique. Typically we always talk to each other in our industry between the different operators, but we we rarely involve the ultimate end customer, the shipper, in that discussion. I think that made the big difference for us. So I cannot answer that question for you, of course, but that's the big exercise you need to do. Really think outside of your comfort zone, and who should you involve that is just outside of those borders, and set up a new ecosystem. That then things, because if you just do the same things you've been doing over and over in the past, nothing really isn't really going to happen. So you need to look at it a little bit different if you want to get different results.
Yeah. Clear. The stuff that keeps you awake at night and you don't know who has the answer to.
Yeah.
Super, Nathan, thank you. If I may ask you, there's a question from Vincent that's quite specific. Perhaps you could answer that directly in the chat. I think Vincent would be very grateful.
Okay.
I'm going to end with one final question, and that's to Isabel. Take it back to the user. Now, you mentioned you have this user support facility where people come in and optimize their samples. Obviously, because you have huge volumes of users, this is an enormous investment, but it sounds like a very important investment, that all this logistics process, and then the sample comes and they do the experiment, but the sample was wrong. So what percentage of your users are actually needing to optimize their sample before they actually can even get on the beam?
It depends. I mean, so this facility is, so most of the users that come and use the beamlines directly, they are structural biologists, or they are in this area. But then you have other labs of, that they are biochemistry labs or biophysics labs, and they don't have the structural biology expertise. So those are the ones that use more often the preparation, sample preparation, characterization facility, because they come with their samples and they learn what they have to do for the samples to be used at the beamlines. Okay, so it's those labs where you don't have any expertise in terms of structural biology, and yes, but you want to have the structure, and you want to have that for your own research. So yes.
Yeah. Okay, super. Thank you. Yeah, very nice to see. A huge thank you to all the speakers. It was very enlightening. I really appreciate you taking your time out of your day for this. And thanks also to the organizers for a very, very interesting conference. And I'll hand it over back to Jürgen and Ute. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. That was fantastic and very, very interactive. And also thank you to the audience for contributing with lots of questions. Jürgen, what do we do in the afternoon?
Well, first, thank you, Isabel and Sophie, for the explanations about your challenges and daily work, and Nathan going to solution mode. I mean, that's terrific. And also a specific thank to Anton, who made this session really, really good with his enthusiasm and driving it forward. Now we have a break, and we will be back later this afternoon. It'll be at 2 o'clock. No, sorry. Yes, 2 o'clock.
It will be at 2 o'clock. And
Yes.
I mean, technical information, please either stay in this conference room, or if you want to reconnect, use the link you received in the morning. That is the same link. We don't change links in the afternoon. And in the afternoon, we are crossing borders and learn something about managing customs and taxes. So that, I think, will be the topic that is relevant for all of us here in the group of participants. And we do have a dedicated talk about the Brexit in this session, right?
Correct.
So thank you very much again for your contributions and participation. See you back at 2 o'clock here in the same Zoom conference room. Thanks very much.
Perfect.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
And see you tonight. No?
Hopefully.
Yes, yes. Okay.